Disclaimer: JackFed videos are not meant to replace the actual viewing experience of Rupaul's Drag Race. You can stream Drag Race Season 14 and all other Drag Race seasons on WoW Presents Plus. Please go support the show and all the queens that appeared on it. Welcome back to my review series where I'm going to go through every single season of Drag Race and review them and then rank them all at the end. With the first episode going really great and then getting shot down before the month was up, I decided to kind of put the series on the back burner up until summer and just focus on quick bites and deep dives. Over summer, I'm going to have a lot more time to watch the episodes, rewatch them, watch new seasons. I'm excited to get into it, but for now, let's just stick with the seasons that I have been currently watching, and of course, we have to talk about Season 14. Season 14 premiered all the way back on January 7th of 2022. And now, 4 months later, with one episode airing each week, we have finally made it to the end. It was filmed back in early May of 2021. A little fun fact is you can actually see a lot of the runways back in the Emmy consideration post that Drag Race did for season 13. It's an unlisted video on YouTube, but it somehow got leaked and you can see things like Maddie's little moon look. It's really interesting to see. So before the promo in December, this was actually our first look into season 14, but then we do get to the promo from December. I didn't really go into this in my UK video, but I should have. I think that's something that we should talk about before getting into the actual season is the promo for the season. And let me tell you, this is budget. I absolutely adore this promo, and I think it's one of the best ones we've gotten in years. Bob recently did a ranking of all the promos, and he put this one at a decent spot, but I think it could have been a lot higher. I think coming off of season 13, season 13's wasn't really a concept, but this is, and I really enjoyed their concept. It was a Candyland theme, the sets were super cute, all of the queens did a really good job. It had like a good teasing of the chocolate bar, but you didn't really know what was happening quite yet. To me, the promo was just the first sign that the season kind of had an idea of what they were gonna do and kind of learned from season 13 and wanted to evolve from it. We'll get back more into this concept a little later. Everything leading up to the season was very standard Drag Race. We got the cast reveal, we got the promo. It was just setting out to be a very good season. But of course, as every cast is revealed, there's always a little controversy to come out, and this one is kind of a special one, so let's get into the casting. Also, like I say every time, only a small portion of my viewers are subscribed to my channel, so if you enjoyed this review, please subscribe. And finally, like and comment for the algorithm, let's get into it. Before we get into the queen that started a lot of controversy, let's talk about the rest of the cast and how I think that casting wanted to choose them. I'm not going to go over every single person because I don't think all of them were cast for a reason, but there are around 5 or 6 that I think were. One of my favorite queens on the season, Carrie Colby, was cast in order to continue to push the inclusivity that Drag Race has been aiming for. It's really exciting that with every US season we're getting at least one trans contestant, but I'm hoping that we get even more in the future. Carrie was most likely also cast with the other 2 LA girls in mind, with her sharing a close relationship with Cornbread. And though Carrie didn't really have a storyline of the season or break out of her shell in order to kind of get to the top, I think that she was one of the most exciting queens to watch week to week. I think she said it best herself when she said that she wanted to provide the support to the queens that she didn't get in her own transition. Carrie was there to spread her wisdom of being a trans woman, and it's so amazing to see. Her wisdom was so effective that it got to 4 of her sisters who all came out as trans either on the show or post the show. She is so funny and charismatic, and she is insanely wise for her age. She's only 25. And the bonus is she was able to help so many of her sisters through their transition, and she's just overall a wonderful queen. And then we have Cornbread. Oh my god, my favorite queen of the season. I think Cornbread's casting was basically down to, okay, I think it's just time, because Cornbread has been well known in the LA scene forever, and so I think it was just a matter of time before she got on Drag Race, and when I saw her, I was so beyond excited. She's been everywhere doing everything, so I know that they knew she was going to be great TV. It was just like, okay, finally let's cast her now, we need some really good TV. I just think she's a queen that a lot of people know. Maybe they didn't know her name, but now they do. And producers kind of banked on the fact that people would know her and tune into watching the season, and honestly, it got me to watch even more. Both Willow and Daya had very apparent connections to 2 former queens who are some of the fan favorites. And where Willow was able to be seen as her own person, I feel like Daya was kind of forced into being Crystal Method, even though she really isn't that Crystal Method at all. Regardless, I think casting choices like this are always really smart to make because the connections can really lead to storylines pretty easily. I'll get into this more a little later, but someone like Willow, even though she doesn't completely resemble Evie, they have a lot of characteristics that you can call back to and be like, oh yeah, Evie would do something like that. And finally, the queen that kind of struck all the controversy in the world, let's talk about Maddie Morphosis really quick. The discourse around Maddie's casting was not very valid. I understand sort of why people were saying it, but I think it was just coming from a place of negativity from the start, and there wasn't really a lot we could do from there. Yes, Drag Race has made very interesting casting choices and casting mistakes in the past, but I think it was very clear from the start that Maddie had a lot of promise and was a very promising ally. So when people were invalidating all the things that she's done, it kind of made me annoyed, but then other people came to her defense, so I never really felt the need to talk about it in the past. But because this is the casting portion, we're talking about it here, and we have the hindsight of the season behind us, so I think that people have really warmed up to Maddie now. I think Maddie's performance on the season, though again not great, she really got the ball rolling for conversation and really won the fans over in the end. I think casting any heterosexual queen would always lead to a lot of criticism, but when you cast Maddie and she comes out and is a wonderful spokesperson and says that not everyone should do drag just because she's doing it, I think it's really interesting and it honestly gets the conversation going for a lot of other things. She calls back to my mindset on drag that I think anyone could do drag, but they have to have a level of appreciation and respect for the art form before they do it. And that's where it's valid for Maddie to do drag. She has that respect and appreciation for where drag came from, and that's all you need. You just need that and you can do drag because it's an art form for everyone as long as they appreciate it. These 5 queens I think were cast for the most apparent reasons, and all the other queens, they may have an intention behind their casting, but I don't outright know what it is. And one last little quick note for the casting, this is the first season I think in a long time where there's only one New York girl that was cast in Jasmine Kennedy. Anyways, with casting out of the way, obviously the queens lead to the storyline, so let's get into them. The problems with these longer seasons is that it's harder to stretch out these conflicts into like 16 episodes before it gets stale. Recurring storylines on these longer seasons are just harder to do because the queens can't really keep up the whole storyline unless they're forcing it. So we often get like 1 to 2 episode arcs and then they're finished. The most overarching ones I could see is Willow's strategy, Jasmine kind of toning it down, and Daya clawing her way to the top. After rewatching the season to get all the clips, I've really grown to appreciate Willow's run for a lot of different reasons. I think Drag Race still has a long way to go when depicting medical conditions on TV, but I think they did Willow's whole storyline pretty well. And I think it comes down to Willow being the one that was mostly in control of her storyline. In the first half of the season, we were introduced to Willow's condition, saw her go through obstacles and overcome them, and in the second half it was mentioned, but it wasn't really brought up that much. I think we got just enough in the first half to realize that this is something that she's going to deal with and she's going to overcome it, and we didn't really have to dwell on it for too long. They didn't outwardly say it, and I don't think they needed to. Willow is just a person with a medical condition, but she's more than just her condition, so that's what we got in the second half of the season. It's always going to be in the back of our minds that yes, she is struggling with this condition, but by not showcasing it every single time that she's on screen, we really know that she's not defined by it, as no one is if they have a medical condition. It's shaped her life, but it's also made her the person she is today, and we got that in the first half, and then in the second, we just got to appreciate that person that she became, and it's so great because we just get to see her celebrating the life that she has. One of my favorite parts about the season was getting to love Jasmine Kennedy. Jasmine's storyline was very much real. I don't think that anything was forced. It was just really her reassessing everything that she's done and her behavior so far. It seems like Cornbread really did care, and though she doesn't always know how to phrase things, I think she always means the best. But then with Cornbread's untimely exit, we actually saw the true test of Jasmine's behavior. Without Cornbread there, would she still be able to navigate situations and make sure she's not over-talking people? Honestly, yes, and she became one of the most likable and endearing queens of the season. Up until the end, every conflict she had with Daya or Maddie, it seemed very neutral and there was no right person. We see both sides of the person, and I feel like Jasmine was really able to shake a shady edit that she could have gotten. She is a killer lip syncer and had 2 of the best Untucked episodes ever. By the time her performance run its course, she was one of the most well-regarded queens on the season, and I think that everything was very bittersweet, but it was a really good exit. Where other exits were kind of sad, I feel like Jasmine's was like, yes, let's go out on a positive note, this was a great time, I'll see you guys on All Stars and I'll win. It's just this type of storytelling that I love on Drag Race, where we see a queen evolve over season without it being told to us. Jasmine is one of my favorite queens of the season, and I am so excited to see her on All Stars. Her glow up is already crazy. And then we get to Daya Betty, who I think held most of the story for the season. There were two main storylines attached to Daya, being one, getting eliminated first and then clawing her way to the top, and two, just kind of fighting with everyone but in a very interesting way. Do I think Daya is a terrible person and her behavior on the show reflects who she is in real life? Absolutely not. I don't think any villain on Drag Race should be held accountable for their behavior on TV unless there's actual underlying issues like racism or you know what I mean. But it was clear that Daya was playing it up for the cameras and had the competition get to her, both very common things in this situation. Dislike her character on TV all you want, but you can't deny that it made entertaining TV. Half of the people complaining about Daya Betty also complain about the show having no drama at all, and you can't have it both ways, guys. And along the way of her pushing conflict, we got to see her talent and why she should be there. She really did claw her way back to the top and had some great challenge performances, and you can't deny that. Sure, maybe wins should have gone to other people, but there were places where she was low or in the bottom where she shouldn't have been. Willow and Daya both showed the potential for this as a competition reality show. Willow brought the strategy and Daya was so cutthroat in all the right ways. Daya was not going for Miss Congeniality, she was going for the win, so she was gonna fight for every part she wanted. It's honestly not shady at all, and people who don't like this determination honestly just don't appreciate the competition for what it is. So these were the three overarching storylines for the season, but there were a ton of little storylines that happened throughout. I'll get into this more later, but with Cornbread gone, I feel like they had one of their top 4 placements gone from the competition, so they needed to replace it, but they didn't really know who with. So I want to say that the top 7 queens could have all made it to the finale very easily because they were all getting their storyline set up just a little bit. Bosco had an interesting run because it seemed like they wanted to push her and then she kinda didn't do that great in the first half, but then when Save the Queen rolled around, she got the challenge win, and then from there she was like a very prominent figure. I feel like Bosco was the alternate narrator to Carrie, and once Carrie left, Bosco really took over and got a lot of screen time off of that. The last leg of the season really saw all sides of Bosco. She went from messing up Snatch Game to almost going home on the lip sync Lollapalooza to then almost going home on the Rusical and getting the golden chocolate bar, getting saved, and then winning the roast. It was really cool to see. But then with this and her 3 challenge wins, you also get the idea that she's not gonna win, which is weird how they edited it. Like by having her go through hell and back, almost getting eliminated twice and then bouncing back and getting a challenge win, it's a really cool storyline, but then you get to the end and you're like, oh, there were those moments where she wasn't that great, and then she got saved by the drag gods apparently, and that doesn't really justify her winning. Regardless of how much it hurt her perception in the eyes of the fans, I think over time it'll be looked on pretty fondly, though there is probably some producer meddling in there. I think it's still really entertaining. I'll quickly touch on Jorgeous and Deja. Jorgeous was obviously Rue's favorite, and Deja, oh my god, they under-edited her so much. It's annoying when you see someone with so much talent not really getting the time of day, and that sucks because I love Deja, and even at Snatch Game, she was amazing, and I think she should have won and probably could have won even if the performances were better, but I still don't know if they saw her in the top. The thing is, I think if she killed the roast, they could have maybe given her that win, even though Bosco also had the storyline going on, and justified her being in the top because they were kind of planting the seeds in that episode. But with her not doing so well, it's like, alright, it's her time, we'll see her back for All Stars. Same with Jorgeous, because I know that Rue loves her, and I think she performed okay over the course of the season, but towards the end, I feel like she was just struggling a lot. There's some behind the scenes tea with that, but I think honestly the challenges towards the end were just not really up her alley, and it was just her time. I honestly do think they wanted to push her, but then they were doing things to kind of keep her from performing her best, so I don't know if she could have had a justified top 5 placement unless they really edited her for it. And then we get to Lady Camden. The lip sync Lollapalooza was titled A Very Special Episode, but honestly I think that should be the title of both Camden's wins. Camden has such a weird edit on the season where if she's not high or low, she's barely in the episode. So that's why up until the Glamazon Prime episode, she had like the one little Camgeria thing and then like obviously her talent show performance, but before that she wasn't really getting edited that much. So fast forward to next week, it's her first very special episode with her dominating the entire time. And then a couple more weeks of doing okay or not great, and then another very special episode and she dominates again. I think they really wanted to push the Camgeria storyline, but it was more behind the scenes, so instead they had the Willow and Angeria storyline play out, and that just didn't leave Camden a lot to do outside of murdering challenges. So there will be weeks where the whole episode is just focused on her, and then the next week we barely see her, and it was just really confusing. The episodes where it does focus on her are some of the best of the series and really call back to classic Drag Race, so you can't really complain, but I wish we saw more of her. And finally, Angeria was such a weird case this season. Angeria started out so strong, but by around the lip sync Lollapalooza, I saw them stop editing her at all in the episodes. Where other people got a storyline over the course of that episode to an extent, Angeria got basically nothing. The most we got was Willow being worried that she was gonna go home, but that's more to do with Willow and less to do with Angeria. It just feels weird because she was so prominent in the first part of the season, being high for so many episodes in a row, and then she just didn't perform the best in the second half and they gave her nothing to do, so people just don't really see her as that much of a contender. And I don't think that's a fault to her at all, I just really think they under-edited her in the second half. One thing I forgot to mention is that over the course of the season, there were like 3 times where someone was like, oh, I was so close to the win, and then the next week they win. Like they did that 3 times in a row with Camden, Daya, and Deja. It's a go-to Drag Race storyline where they're like, oh my god, I want to win so bad, and then they get it, it's satisfying, it's great, but when you see the same story arc happen in one season 3 times, you kind of start to see the pattern. The reason this story arc kept happening is because the season was just so long, and that brings me to my next point on production. VH1 or Paramount Plus order a certain amount of episodes every single season. And with Drag Race only continuing to grow every single year, obviously more episodes are going to be ordered. So there are a couple of things that Drag Race can do to make sure they get the episodes out there and keep them entertaining for all the viewers. They could either have more queens on, but we saw that didn't really go well in season 11 with 15 queens. They could switch up the format or do special episodes, but we saw that didn't go very well in season 13. So the last logical option is to keep the queens around that are making the season possible. This is through non-elimination episodes and of course the chocolate bar twist. The discourse around the chocolate bar has been talked about to death, so I'll try to keep it short. I think it was an interesting idea. A lot of people hated it, but I think it's the most alternative way that they could kind of save someone without just making it extremely obvious. Of course, diehard fans like myself are going to read into it and be like, oh my gosh, this is so obviously rigged, but someone who's just casually watching, this might be a huge moment for them. Praying that one of their favorites gets the chocolate bar could be a really interesting thing that keeps them watching the episodes, and I think that it's a really good idea by production. The placement of the bar is where it gets a little iffy though. I think on paper it's a completely fine twist, but when you have it after 5 non-elimination episodes, one already being a double save, it kind of lessens the blow of the twist. Double saves on Drag Race used to be a novelty, something that's insane, something that happens once every couple seasons, but now it's clear that it's happening every season. And I think that's perfectly fine, especially when they're warranted, but when you have your main attraction of the season being based around something that's going to happen every season already, it's just not the best twist. And then you have 2 other double saves on the season, a top 2 episode, the first 2 episodes are non-elimination, and then an episode where they just skip over the elimination because the next week it's going to be all lip syncs. It gets a little confusing, the pacing gets off. This is just where a lot of the complaints come in from the fans. I am an insanely glass half full type of person when it comes to queens being on my screen for however long, but I completely understand how someone could be so annoyed with people not going home. It just throws the pacing off when only 1 queen gets eliminated for the entire month of March, and 4 out of the 5 finalists got saved in a special way. The stakes just feel so much lower now, especially with the fact that we have a top 5. The queens had to fight tooth and nail to get to the end, and when you're at a top 5, the last cut is so brutal. But it's a cut that has to be made to solidify the top 4 and give us a clearer answer. This whole top 5 exudes charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent, but both season 12 and 13 also did too, but they made the cut at the end. A lot of people have been comparing Angeria to Liv Lux, and I completely agree. Both of them started out insanely strong, have so much talent, but then they started to falter at the end to make room for the actual finalists. And that's where the narrative was starting to go with Angeria, but then they did a double save at the end. So for the last half of the season, we were seeing something very similar to Liv's trajectory, where both of them started to falter and kind of see how they weren't going to make it to the end, but then Angeria did. And that's fine, Angeria is great, Rue obviously loves her, but finishing strong doesn't really matter anymore if you have one good leg at all. To me, I don't think a queen should be defined by a single leg, but I do think that the last leg has more emphasis than the first. It's how most people are going to remember you, and it shows how you stand up against the rest of the competition when only the powerhouses are left. With Liv, we got the vibe that yes, oh my god, she is insanely talented, but she still needs the slight more time to cultivate her drag. And then with Angeria, we kinda got the same thing. We know she's more established, but when the competition started to get more down to it, she started to falter more and more. And that's why the brutal cut at the end means so much. We see someone who does extremely well in the competition not make it to the end because they didn't have the consistency in the hardest part of the race. This last save is the only one that I really don't agree with by production. The rest are okay because they needed to get all the episodes out, but I think for future seasons they could kind of be a little more transparent with the fact that they have to meet the episode quota, and I think I have a decent idea for it. I don't think casting 18 or 19 queens is a good idea at all, but I think they could be like, hey guys, next week is a non-elimination episode, but if you win the challenge, you get the cash prize and a big advantage in the next week after. Something to maybe do with the casting of a challenge or just get a power in the challenge. It really creates a lot of strategy that I think has gone untapped in Drag Race a little too long. I just think the novelty of non-elimination episodes or double saves has just gone away over time, which is okay because I think we're so exposed to it at this point, but being more transparent and just being open to being like, hey, this is non-elimination from the start helps people be more open to the idea of queens not going home. A lot of the backlash started because every time we felt like the ball was going to get rolling and people were going to go home, someone was saved and then the pacing was thrown off, and that's when people got mad. So pacing future non-elimination episodes between elimination episodes and giving queens powers can keep it juicy and keep it fresh. The last criticism I have for production is the accommodations that they didn't really give Willow Pill for the whole season. I touched on the edit already and I don't really want to go into it too much, but when you see someone like Willow struggling to open a box and then you don't do anything about it, what does that say about you, production? The fact that she was desperately trying to get into these boxes to not get screwed over in the challenge, or just points throughout the season where she was just obviously in a fragile state and you guys did nothing about it, it's so frustrating. I do have a feeling that they didn't step in right away for her hands getting extremely cold because they wanted to make it a talking point, but even that feels a little exploitative. Like, you're gonna watch her for a good 10 minutes being in this very vulnerable state, and then you're gonna do something, but first you have to get the footage. It's just, it really irks me. Obviously, I don't know the whole behind the scenes on this, so I hope that Willow was given the accommodations that she needs. There are just so many unintentional implications about production that are implied in the edit that I really don't think they wanted to be there. Every season should be taken as a learning experience, and I think they won't do this again in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed. Let's just get into some good things that I liked about production. Budget, budget, budget. They used it so well, they got amazing guest judges, everything was just a return to form after the past 2 seasons. I think the Lip Sync Lollapalooza was an amazing episode that was really well done, and there were just a lot of one-off episodes that were so great. It's a combination of all the talent on the season, but the backbone is production, and you have to commend them for some great episodes. I only go in so hard on production because Drag Race is monumental. It has been such great representation for so many groups, but when I see that they're lacking in some areas, I just gotta call them out to make sure they know what to do in the future. With the 3 major categories out of the way, let's go into the Drag Race Rites of Passage. Starting out with the runways, coming off of season 13, I don't think that anyone could really beat that. Season 13 was the runway season, and I think they did a good job here, but something about season 13, those girls really killed it. My top 3 fashion queens were Willow, Angeria, and Daya, but I think we got so screwed over by production because Alyssa Hunter was the runway queen of the season. My favorite look though, I think has to go to Deja Skye in her first episode. I've talked about this a lot, it's so beautiful. Other favorites, I love Willow's Spring Has Sprung look, Daya's Mirror Mirror look, and I think I just have to appreciate Angeria's consistency over the course of the season when it comes to the runways. Next up we have the lip syncs, and I don't think there's a single bad one, but I think only a couple really jump the bar. I really like the finale top 2 lip sync, and I really love the top 2 lip sync in Daytona Wins. My Head and My Heart was really fun, and though I don't think there was a standout performance from the Lollapalooza, the fact that all of them were entertaining enough to keep the episode moving was the best part. For the most part, the judging on the season was honestly not that bad. Aside from a questionable win here or there, I think the edit really helped to justify the judges' picks at the end. If they say a queen should be in the bottom, we're more prone to agree because the edit has gotten us to that point. Most of the challenges on the season were standard with a twist, and I think that was great. Improv and acting challenges are very standard on Drag Race, but here we got the Super Tease, which was very unique and very funny, and then we got Daytona Wins, which a lot of it was done in post-production to make it funny. I still don't like that they're having the balls this early. I think that it's hard for people to follow, especially now that they have 2 groups for it. Like, I don't think that was a good decision on their part in the long run. I'm so glad that they brought back the DragCon panel because DragCon is about to happen and it's just really good branding, and the roast and the Rusical are also back, and both of them were great. Something that Denali pointed out on Twitter is that they didn't have a makeover this season, which is crazy. I didn't even notice it because there were so many episodes, but I think it is for the best, and that's probably why I think the judging wasn't that bad, because the makeover judging is where it normally gets me. The newer seasons of Drag Race have a standard for all of the rites of passage, and I think that season 14 does a good job at meeting them. So after a whirlwind of a season, what are my final thoughts? The season was very much a slow burn up until the lip sync Lollapalooza, when it finally sped up and we kinda got an idea of who was making it to the end. I'm never gonna complain about more episodes of Drag Race, but coming back and watching the season again, I feel like it's gonna be harder to do. Because of that pacing, it's gonna be harder to come back and watch the season as a whole, but while watching it week to week, I think it was entertaining because I didn't know who I wanted in the end, so when someone was getting a double save, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, they get one more chance. The main strength of the season is that the cast is one of the best of all time. I think that's what people are really loving about the season too. In the first part of the show, it felt like a lot of the queens weren't really getting a lot of traction on social media, but then you have like 4 of them coming out and then you're like, oh my god, this is so cool, they're all so sweet, and then you just fall in love with all of them, all of the interaction. They were just such a great season to watch afterwards. I was just as entertained watching them on social media as I was watching them on my television screen. And I think that seeing this amazing natural interaction off the screen really helped to make me care about them more on TV. There's probably people out there who didn't really vibe with the season or the cast and felt like it was dragging too long, but again, for me, when I see that queens don't get eliminated and see that they get another chance, I'm happy because I care so much for them because I watch them on social media. So after thinking it over, I'm recording this as I finish editing. I really want to give season 14 an 8 or 8.5 out of 10. I'm re-recording this little audio section because at first I gave it a 7.5 and then I was like maybe an 8, but now I think it is a solid 8 and maybe even an 8.5 because I've just really grown to love it, especially getting all these clips and watching it again. Everything feels so fresh but at the same time familiar, and I think that's the best thing that they could hope for with a modern season of Drag Race. The positives of the season are a great cast, classic challenges that are being freshened up, and great 1 to 3 episode arcs. The negatives are the pacing issues, a lackluster twist, and dropping the ball in some areas when it comes to accommodations for queens. Overall, I really did enjoy the season. It may be linked to the fact that I make videos around it, so let me know if I'm being a little too positive or a little too negative in the comments below. Also, tell me what you thought about the season. That's it for me for now. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break, maybe take a willow pill to help me fall asleep or something. I don't know. I'll see you guys soon with another video. And one last thing, yes, the Raja video is coming out next week.